All right, great. Okay, good evening and welcome to the second book club meeting. We are currently reading chapters 4, 5, and 6 of A Shape of Being. Okay, and does anyone want to start about the transition from chapter 3 to chapter 4? What have you seen in terms of the transition from chapter 3 to 4? Anybody? Memoon?
I must confess that, I've read it
Mm-hmm.
and I know I've made notes somewhere. But it's when you're reading it, it makes sense, but it hasn't sunk in. And like the first three chapters was easier. This one was like, okay, that makes sense. The only thing I remember was the journey of transformation. It's like I could imagine is how do I journey to the consciousness that I desire? Wow, that was so powerful.
Yeah.
That's about the only thing I remember. It's like, yeah, it is a journey, and we are all in a journey.
Absolutely. And the transition also focuses on moving from broader aspects of, whether it is looking inside yourself or whether it is a shift in focus from a mindset to transformation within, right? And it also introduced a couple of core concepts. So that was the basic transition from chapter 3 to chapter 4. Did you have any thoughts when you were reading chapter 4, anything that stuck out to you all?
I think that power, the the model about power,
Mm-hmm.
um, from powerless to, okay, you get your power from I'm associated with someone of power that I think is of power. So, oh, okay, that's my power. And I realized when you're coaching, a lot of leaders, managers are stuck in by what I achieve. That's my power. So they always remember their power is there. To transition, to move, to be able to something happen that you could reflect. Okay, it's what am then you start searching for your purpose and whatnot. So that's not a transition that is easy to do. And thank goodness for coaching. So coaches normally are able to transition to that. Yeah. Then I don't know whether we'll ever be able to get into that power by wisdom. So that's the guru.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that really struck to me.
Yeah. Uh, the focus from external achievement, external influence,
Yes, into
and
internal.
yeah, and validation from something that is external to moving more internally, being more centered, a lot more focused on how you have changed, whether it is your mindset or your perception, right? That is also something that caught my mind when I was reading the book. That movement from that external place of influence and moving more within and getting more centered and focusing on your perceptions and insights is something that I got from there. Deepti, any thoughts?
Um, in chapter 4, what I liked was the way they kind of explained the self concept. They're saying, it's the mental image that we have of ourselves. And then
Mm.
I like the way they said, when we are born when we are, after we are born, the childhood that we have, it has a big impact. And how the ego is formed. It's the shell that is protecting
Yes.
us.
Yes.
That was a very nice way of putting it. Uh, then they explain the personal power, which, I mean, all the explanations are very, very nice. But yeah, I like the way the author is trying to kind of give us that journey to understand, okay, this is how this happens.
Hmm.
Right? So even personal power relates to that from which you draw your sense of self. So, and from what are you drawing your sense of self, who you are, and your worth, purpose, and power in this world? That
Y-
I've written down. That stuck out for me.
Yes, yeah,
Like,
absolutely. And that's so powerful, that sense of self moving again, coming back to your own, within yourself. And that sense of self is not dependent on somebody else. It's just such a powerful thing to know, even as individuals, even not as coaches, right? And Anubhuti, uh, even though you didn't read, you've been going back and forth between the paragraph. I'm sure you have something to add when it comes to the sense of self. And I know that you do, right? So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So I abandoned the effort of trying to read this book after my repeated failures in the beginning. But when it comes to sense of self, um, yeah, even Freud says, and all, even Louis said, you name it, and everyone points it back to how the foundational years create an impact and therefore create the programming that we run our whole life with. So all traumas, all instincts, all behaviors somehow go back to the unmet needs of a child or the met needs of a child, and therefore the security blanket that we carry emotionally. But I might be rambling completely when it comes to the book.
No, what you're saying absolutely makes sense, because everything that we are today is a product of all our years, our experiences, everything combined. And that is who we are today. It's either shaped us positively, negatively, work in progress, whatever it is, right? It is
But
exactly what you're
I want
talking
to
about.
add something to this. Now,
Sure.
I've worked, I'm a therapist, I'm a psychologist, and one thing I've learned over the years is what happened when we were a child was beyond our control. The healing or the shift happens when you say, okay, what happened, happened. But today, as an adult, I have the power to shape my life and heal the past if I have to. So reparent myself or tell that, the adults around me did whatever they did, what they thought was right from where they were coming from. And I don't need to carry those hurts or those wounds or that baggage with me in the present and then in the future. So that power of now gives me all the tools I need to move past it and therefore transition from a wounded child to a healed adult.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, you kind of hit on what I was going to say next, from, talking about presence of, about now, because when we move forward in the book, and this is something that as a coach, I have a question to people who have been coaching for so long. How do you all be actually present in every coaching conversation, right? Because that concept of presence is something that is core to us, and that is something that he also talks about um, in chapter 5, right? That's this that entire space about presence. So the question out to you all: how do you all create that presence? How do you all maintain that presence?
It's surprising that, as you're going into a coaching space, after a while, you've learned how to prepare yourself to be present. And to a certain extent, you're there for the client, to an extent that if you are outside that space, sometimes I ask myself, how did I come up with that question? What does because those are not the questions that that will come naturally to me. So I thought so I was having this conversation with a very experienced coach and very senior coach, and he said, that's the power of presence. So I said, oh, okay. So that was
Yeah. No, absolutely right. Sorry, someone was saying something. Jissy, you're saying something. Please go ahead.
Um, actually, this word being present might mean different things to different people also. So, just for was thinking of telling what I am present now, right now, that being present, it can involve uh, maintaining trust, safety, and to some extent that listening, that connection. So correct me if I am planning.
It's a combination of everything that you're talking, right? Because when you can only listen if you're present, you can only actively listen when you're present, right? And that you can give that space of safety also when you are present in the moment. I can see Deepthi having a quizzical expression. Deepthi, do you have anything to add to what I'm saying?
No, I was just wondering if I could bring what my mentor keeps telling us, how, two things. One is, are you there? Are you, as in, is your identity there while you're coaching? Second is, every time you ask a question, is it for yourself or is it for the client? So
Yeah.
when we are saying presence, it's our absence that we are trying to cultivate. So yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that because, when I first started coaching, I was a mentor for I am still a mentor for many years. And the first time I had my an official coaching session, right? I had just finished a mentoring session and then moved into the coaching session. Okay. And I realized that while talking, while having that conversation, there were certain things where I said, in my head, I already know the solution to it. So the questions, like absolutely apt, the questions were for me more than for them, right? It was more leading. And I was like, no, that kind of like, so I started doing a lot of things like not having a mentoring call, at least in the beginning, before getting on a coaching call, right? So that is also about presence. It is you being there as a coach to help them, not leading them, not pushing your agenda, right? That is also what presence is. Amber, do you want to add anything? Amber? Okay. Does that answer your question, Jesse?
Yeah.
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 I wonder where Parnita went, because she actually has done something on this book. And, Anubhuti, can you check where she is? She like came for a bit and she just went off. So
Yeah, I
Parniti,
said hi and she vanished.
so Parnita also is from our PQ cohort as well. All right, sorry. Any other insights that you'll want to talk about from these last two chapters?
I think Sandeep might have something to say.
Sandeep hasn't.
I haven't read the book. After the fourth chapter, after the third chapter, I didn't read. I couldn't read. So the sense of self is something so many people have written differently. So I don't know how, but that's, yeah. So I'm not adding anything. I'm just a listener right now.
There is, sorry,
No, please go ahead.
there's one thing that came to my mind while I was listening, and that is, how after we are born, we get this shell, and then we have to break the shell and then become our authentic self, right? That's the full cycle. And I was like, so why do we have the shell? It is to integrate with the world that's happening, or that's going, right? And what if we don't have the shell? We'll become those people who are very far away from reality. And so it is essential for us to build our shell and then break out of it, rather than keep no shell from the beginning till the end.
Can you say that again?
Okay. Uh, so when we are born, we have our shells, which is our ego.
Yeah, yeah,
And then through coaching or through self-actualization, when we reach that, the shell gets broken, and then what
Mhm.
comes out is actually our authentic self,
yeah.
which is there from the beginning,
Hmm.
right? Now, if we did not have the shell from the beginning till the end, we'd be so out of touch from reality, even though we are our authentic self. We don't understand, we may not understand how the other person will work or the world works. We need that shell to kind of integrate into the world and then unlearn. You have to break out in, it's like, what they say, learn the notes and play your song. So without
Hmm.
learning the notes, you can't play the song. I mean, I'm just keep putting it out here.
Yeah. Uh, for me, I have an existential question, right, about what is your authentic self, right? Because I feel that we are, with every day that passes, while there is that authentic self, it does not remain the same. It can be a shell when you're born, right? But there's something else that is making you constantly change or transform, right? So I'm not sure about uh, the authentic self. See, even when we know what our authentic self is, right, we are either have we ever reached our authentic self? uh, I know it's an existential question and may possibly not a part of the book, but I don't know. Can anyone answer this? Because I personally, my thinking is that we have a vision of how we want to be and we are constantly working towards it. But have we actually 100% reached it? What is the authentic self? I don't know. It may be too deep. I'm not sure. Or
Yeah.
not enough for this session, or may not be right also for this this session. But yeah.
So, I just wanted to, since you have done that PQ, it is the essence, in one sense. But if you attend the landmark, it will tell you that there is no reality. It's all myth,
Yeah.
it's all so
Perception, right?
perception, yeah.
Hmm.
So what is your reality is being created by you, right?
Yeah.
That is also your creation. So actually, different authors have approached all these things
Yeah.
very differently, but I could connect it the most with PQ concept of authentic self, essence,
Yeah.
essence, your
Hmm.
essence. That child activity. I don't know how many of you have done that. I mean, yeah, I can see at least two have done. I
Yes,
don't know
I've
whether
done that.
you've done.
Oh, I was in cohort 7.
I did in cohort 6.
Oh,
I
Oh,
did
you're
long
just
time.
one ahead of me.
Yeah, I did long time back. Yeah, two.
hmm.
So yeah, so it's like so different people have approached
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
differently, and
Yeah.
And
That entire concept of duality, non-duality, that's a different spiritual conversation to kind of have, right? So let me just bring
yeah,
it back to the book.
so
Mamun, sorry, you were saying something?
yeah, I just wanted to add to your question, what is
Mhm.
your authentic self? So the question underlying that to me is that, does your value change
Hmm.
as you grow? Or is the value stuck with you? Whatever value that you have, does it stay with you? To a certain extent, that's your essence, isn't it? Your values.
Hmm.
But your worldview, your belief system, everything else changes. So what is authentic?
Hmm.
Authenticity goes back to all this under I love the iceberg. So whatever is under the iceberg is your authentic self, so to
Hmm.
say, is your being.
Yeah.
But some of the things under your being, your experiences, your worldview changes.
Hmm.
But the question now is, does your value change?
Yeah.
Or your iteration of that value?
Yeah.
It might be the same value, but how you look at that value might expand as you have more, as you experience worldview. So in a sense, your authentic self may change, but your essence might not change.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully put.
That-
Thanks, Maimon.
So that's my
Deepti,
so
like
that's my
that's what I'm
PQ
trying
and what
to
not
say.
to read.
Absolutely, I agree.
So
Yeah.
I want to add something here, okay, and that is there was this one sentence which stood out for me, and I somehow maybe I feel the sentence is not complete, so I don't agree with it. It said you get to choose who you want to be. Okay, now imagine that I'm going to say I'm really a rose, the rose flower, and I'm going to choose to be Garbera because I want to. Now, is that really who I am? I'm not sure. Now, if I choose to be a Garbera because of something that's happening inside of me, that might be my authentic self. But if it's because of something that's happening outside of me, that's not my authentic self. Could be. I don't know. So therefore,
But
that sentence
choosing
feels
is
very
you,
incomplete.
isn't it? When you say choosing, choosing is your
Yeah,
internal self.
internal,
Yeah.
yeah.
So whatever. So it's still because there's also this word that who you are is how you show up.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
And that is your authentic self.
That's your authentic self for that
Yes.
moment.
Yes.
Got it. Jesse was saying something.
Uh, so when we talk about authentic self, what was coming in my mind was children's. They are kind of more authentic, they express more. But when we experience, when we have those strong beliefs, we kind of lose fuel in authenticity. Generally speaking, that's what I was. Maybe I'm not sad.
Yeah, life happens.
Yes, until they start learning.
Yeah.
Children lies very, very well because I've got 6
Lies.
grandchildren now. They lie to you and face
Wow.
to what do you call this, to safeguard themselves, to as a defense mechanism. So that's why I say until they start learning what is the okay, the rules of engagement.
Yeah. So there was something that I don't know whether I was reading or watching or something like that, right? And there was this one kid who was constantly, I think, beaten up for lying. Okay. And there's this other kid who was constantly uh, rewarded for snitching on somebody else. Okay. So for one, even doing bad or doing something that is not wrong was being positively reinforced or validated. So it's for them, they did not see anything wrong in what they are doing because they are rewarded for it. And the other person, their behavior, they started hiding their behavior because of the fact that they would be punished. So either way, just adding to what actually Maimun was saying, right? So even what you're doing can be that external influence that is happening that we spoke about in chapter 4, right? It can be right and it can be wrong, but how the outside world engages with you also kind of purports that behavior, right? So yeah, when she was saying that about her grandchildren, I suddenly thought about this. I don't remember what I read. Okay, do we have any thoughts, any questions before we move forward? Okay, all right. I had a question. When was a time that you all actually felt that you all made a transition? or you all actually there was a transformation within you all? Was there ever a time that you all personally felt, whether as a coach or even personally, that there was some sort of a thing, or a light bulb that said, okay, I've made the transformation, or I'm on the way to transforming? Anyone has any uh you know
There've been many times,
experiences?
many times. So
Hmm.
from how I was as a little child to a teenager to a youth in college to a wife to a mother to when I decided to hell with it. So each milestone will bring a different side of you,
Yeah.
and you'll shed off identities that no longer work for you, and you'll take on identities that are now more relevant. And
Hmm.
as you do that, what Memon was also saying, you keep choosing who you want to be,
Yes.
and your authenticity, your definition of authenticity keeps changing.
Hmm.
And as you grow, you then take on a different persona, which might be very, very different from how you chose to show up as a child or as a teenager. And while the integral thread might still be the same, the way you view and the way you show up might be different.
Uh, do you have any specific experience that you would like to share, Anubhuti?
I was thinking of it, and there are some that again become very, very personal.
Hmm.
But I think there's one that really stands out. As a person, I do not like to get into conflict if I can. And as a child, I was very soft spoken. And then when I was expecting my son, I remember going somewhere and or was it after he was born? So he was a small child, or I was expecting, not clear. But somebody tried to push me. And I remember the instinct was to push back and to say, hey, watch out. And I was surprised by my own voice, because I'm not a person who would, at that time, I wasn't a person who would say anything. But suddenly there was a different person who came out. Even when he was growing up, I started worrying about things that I never cared about. So it was a different person that was coming out, and I was like, okay, that's different. That's new. I don't know her. But okay, so with time, now my son is 13. I've I've started to know the mom and the me and try to marry it together. But that was a big transition from a person I was to this new person who was coming up with different fears, different strengths that I did not know. Yeah.
Thank you. Sandeep, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm not sure whether, but yeah, I mean, so significant transformation, that's what you wanted to say, right?
Yes. Have you experienced any transformation personally?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, while, as Anubhuti was saying, there are many in life, but uh, there is a major thing that happened. So I think when I was in 8th standard, I discovered my life purpose, which, there was a question that used to go to me, what is the purpose of my existence? At that time, I used to keep on answering, and then I answered that. And then I thought, okay, I will become a scientist and I'll solve and make the world a better place. I'll solve the problems. And so the whole focus was on engineering, science, and that is the way to change the world. And so when I think in 2000, yeah, around 9, 10, 10, yeah, I attended a program in TIS. And then, there was a complete change in me. And I discovered that, this side of the counseling side is actually one of the ways to change the world. And why is my focus right on there? So it was a complete change in my whole, approach towards life. That happened. So not that, actually, yeah, when I actually coaching I did in 2000, and that is when there was a shift, but that was not that shift. But this shift that happened in 2010 was like, where is my focus in life has completely shifted. Um, like believing it as a way to change the world, as a purpose. The whole
Hmm.
thing shifted completely. That was a mega shift for me. So
Got
while
it.
perceptions and beliefs, there is many I can say, but
Hmm.
I think that was a major shift that happened, those stages.
At a fundamental level.
Yeah, at a fundamental level.
Yeah. What about y'all, Mamoon?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were saying.
So I used to be a hardcore corporate, P&L, always looking at the P&L and whatnot, always on my, very much in my head kind of thing. And what happened was that we had change of leaderships, several times change of leadership. Then it became like, yes,
Your
my
grandchild.
grandson, yeah, he can't, so, so it was like, it felt like I'm going through this loop over and over again. I said, this is the definition of madness. So a friend of mine said, she wanted to go for Ayurvedic retreat. I have no idea what it is. And I said, yes. And we went for about 21 days. Never done that before. And coming out from there, when I was there, we had this conversation when the office was not there. We just have a very, very insightful conversation with strangers that came for the Ayurvedic retreat. And I just had, okay, I know what to do. So because I've already mentioned in my head that, I want to leave the corporate world when I want to be able to know when to leave. And what I want to do something when I leave. I want to give back when I leave.
Hmm.
Then I thought the organization where I was in, they have a foundation and nobody is running it actively. I've never requested for a position before. Ladies, we just go with the flow. I go through the rank and file until I was very senior management. So I went up to the management. I said, why don't you let me take over and run this? I know I've never done this. I don't have any background in charity, CSR or whatever, but let me try and get it to work. And the boss was like, they trust me enough. They had a conversation about it. And that was about the time when Malaysia required that all public listed company must have a proper CSR reporting as part of the annual reporting. Then they say, okay, you start the CSR department. So that was a huge transformation for me. One, to be able to go up there, to have that audacity to ask for the
Correct.
position and to create a position for me when I have no experience in it. And that happened because of that internal reflection and that conversation with strangers. So that I suppose that was my first word of coaching that I didn't realize I was being coached, because they asked me a lot of questions that gets me to where I was.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. Jesse, you were saying something?
Yeah. Ma'am, what internal shift did you observe that this possible, not career shift?
Yeah, one was that I have that power to make that change. And I just need to ask. The worst they could do is say no to me, and everything will go back. to the madness it was. But what if they say yes?
Yeah. The courage increased exponentially.
Yes.
The purpose gave you that courage, to ask for it.
Exactly.
Deepti, do you have anything to share?
I guess, well, the shift that's happening is me trying to be congruent. What is inside and what is outside, kind of aligning. At the same time, trying to figure out how not to hurt people, how to, keep my values aligned and all of the so that's the journey I'm on right now. So before that, it was all about what's the best way to get things done
Hmm.
and how do I get my needs met. Whether it is congruence or not doesn't matter to me. Now it's all about no congruence matters to me.
Integrity and real self versus ideal self.
How do we integrate, right? How do
Yeah,
we integrate?
the real self versus the ideal self. All of us have an ideal self, but
Yeah.
when we see the real self is so different from that ideal self.
That's the polarity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And that's something we are constantly striving towards. Yeah. All right. So, any thoughts on chapter 6? I love that you have things written down, Deepti. You're keeping, you're, you're keeping us in check.
No, last time Maimon and a few others had stuff written
Yeah,
on, and
yeah.
I was like, how did they do it? Let me try. Yeah.
Yeah, you were an inspiration last time, Mehmood. I was like, now I also have to sit down and write, what
The thing
I've
is,
been
I
reading.
wrote this and I can't remember where I wrote it at, so I couldn't pull out my notes.
Deepti, why don't you start? Because I can see that you have stuff written down.
No, I'm just trying to figure out which is see here what they are saying is, the different stages of transformation, how we go crisis of integrity, how we reach to the fourth one level, then there's the wall. I find that very interesting because
Mhm.
it's kind of the uh it explains the journey really well. So that and I really love the propulsion system. How they talked about personal gravity, and the other one was I forgot spiritual. Personal gravity and one propulsion system.
Propulsion system.
Propulsion.
Yeah, so I love that. Uh, Especially each of the propulsion system, 6 of them, uh, where they talk about spiritual energy, spirit, light of self, inner attitudes, environment, transformative practice. And for me, the first 3 were very, very interesting. I mean, like, I could relate more to the first 3, like, I found them solid.
Mhm.
The rest weren't that much. That's my view on it.
What were the
My
3 that you were able to identify with? Sorry, Mehmood.
no,
Spirit,
go.
spiritual energy, and light of the self.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, the first time I was reading that book, if you kind of see, there's this one picture that they have with the heart in between lot of concentric circles,
Mhm.
right? With the arrows going out. And I was looking, I'm like, what is so important about this that they have to dedicate half a page
Page.
on something which can be done with so small? You can actually draw it small. Now when I'm reading it again, I'm looking at it and I kind of understand, oh, I kind of understand why you did that because it's that important.
Hmm. Thank you. Mehmood, you were saying something? Sorry.
Yeah, when I was reading about the personal gravity, then it was like, that's your saboteurs.
You went to PQ.
I went to PQ.
Okay.
That's your saboteur. So being aware of it is how you are able to let it go.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The first step is awareness before
Yeah,
anything else.
acknowledging it. And I think you can never totally say what is to let it to erase it. You'll never be able to erase it, but being aware of it and it loses its power over you.
Yeah.
So that's the PQ concept, isn't it? We are not here to let to fight it, to weaken it or whatever. Just acknowledge it, and that in itself will weaken it. You label it and it weakens it. So that's the question I always ask myself, who is speaking now?
The sage, the saboteur. No, yeah, absolutely.
Be
That's
aware, even if I wanted to say something, then I ask myself, now who's speaking? Because
Yeah.
then you realize what's the intent, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And once you're aware, right, telling that voice, I'm not going to listen to you, just shut up, is also equally important.
Yes.
From moving from awareness to being able to manage it and move to sage is also equally, powerful for you to do that as well.
Yeah. But because the ego will want to keep, when you are angry and it feels good to be able to lash out, isn't it?
Yeah.
The ego says.
Oh, yes.
So how do you tame that ego and say, nah, that was the little power that you have, over me. So your true self here is your sage, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we are
Jesse,
reading two books in one go, is it?
yes. There are actually quite a bit of similarities, right, in certain spaces uh, when we are talking about certain aspects of it. Obviously, because they're all concepts, so there will be some amount of overlap somewhere, right? Jesse, you were saying something.
Yeah, I think Mammon told that. So when we say okay, shut up to our inner voice, so that usually the real one. That's what I think Mammon also is telling inside.
Yeah. What else have we kind of taken from chapter 6? What about listening beyond words, not just focused on, words, but going beyond that? How did we make that transition when we started coaching, that we're not just listening to what our client or our coachee is saying, but actually going beyond, and maybe even their energy, their presence, what is not being said? Anyone has any examples to share from that, from their experiences?
So I remember in my early days of coaching, and my client got in the loop, and I get stressed because I was like chasing after my client because they're in a loop. So I went for peer coaching, but my peer decided to do a mentoring on me rather than peer coaching. So we had that conversation. And then I realized when I was chasing after, when he said, when I was in the loop, it was because I was not listening. I was too busy trying to answer for that client. I think that was the first realization. So now anytime my client team seems to go in a loop, I pull myself back and said, okay, are you listening? Why is the client in the loop? So it's not the client first. I check myself. Am I listening? So that was a first sign for me.
Okay. So your first sign was you felt that the client is in the loop, but you are also kind of in the loop with the client.
Yeah. So when I first started, of course, I was a hardcore corporate person going into coaching. Yeah, when we were in corporate, we are always like Sandeep as an engineer. Our job is to find solution. Our job is
Yeah.
to come up with the first solution. We are problem solvers. So that mentoring hat was not really eradicated. So how do you realize that you're using your mentoring hat. So the first sign for me was when I was in the loop. So that allows me to really focus on the noises in my head. Because how do you reduce that noises in your head? The fact that the client is going in the loop, chances are you're not asking the right question. Why are you not asking the right question? Chances are you were not listening. You are already coming up. The question you ask comes from,
The solution.
I know the answer. I know
And
the
I know the
answer.
answer.
This is the
Absolutely.
question.
That's exactly what I was telling you in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
It was so difficult for me to move from mentor to coach in the beginning. I had to, then when I started becoming conscious and saying that, no, I cannot, I cannot be asking leading questions, or I cannot be doing this. I may know the solution, but, their journey is different. Then that was a different, kind of not listening, because you're so much in your head trying to ask them the right questions, or trying not to be in your head also was another kind of not listening, if you understand what I'm saying. Right? Yeah. So Deepti, you had something to say.
I was listening to both of you and I have forgotten.
we were talking about how would you be able to listen beyond words to the client. Have you experienced that?
So something came up. So I think I progressed, from just listening to the client to listening to their energies and their feelings. And I remember there are some times I don't even know what to do with it. I'll be like, so I can feel your sadness, and the other person is saying, and I'll be like, what do I do now? Okay, I finished explaining to you what you're feeling. Tell me something back, right? So there are times when I get stuck there, but yeah. It's only when you're in stillness can you feel what the other person is feeling.
Okay, that's
So what do you do when you get stuck with, I can feel your sadness, and the what acknowledge, say, yes, I am.
I have no idea, because sometimes I'll be like, I can feel your sadness, and the person will be like, Then I'll be like, okay, so and then I start reflecting something, or, you know, I just lose that thread, that moment, and then I try and do something else about it. But actually, what I want them to kind of say is, okay, I told you something, see if it helps you in some way, or should we move on? Okay, but it doesn't, I'm not able to vocalize it well. And then there's a break in my talk. And I'm like, okay, something is not going right here. What do you think I should do normally if I say that and there's no reaction?
May I come in there?
I would acknowledge them, and I would just be with them, and and ask them, what do you want to do now? Because do you want to take a moment to sit with it, just honor them for that acknowledgement, and just honor them. It's their moment, so acknowledge them.
But I think from Deepti's point of view is that the client, I think she said, did not acknowledge the fact that she was feeling their sadness or whatever it is. That is what you were asking, right, Deepti? If they don't acknowledge what to do, correct?
Yeah, because
I sorry, I heard that said yes.
so there are people who are very feeling people, and you tell them, so I feel your sadness and I can feel that right now. And they kind of latch onto it. They're like, yes, I understand. And they take you somewhere. But then there are these thinking kind of people. I'm realizing that, afterwards, this is the first time I was coaching someone new. And I say this and there's no reaction. And I don't know what to do
What to
after
do
that.
with that?
It's like,
No reaction. Sorry, I thought they were feeling sadness.
Jissy had something to add when you were saying that.
Yeah, so certain similar situation I have been. So what was most helpful for me was immediately recognize that I'm also in the same state of emotions where the client is. Release that, because when I'm sad, when I'm emotionally upset, I'll probably not be able to quote them. I can ask open-ended questions. So where does it come? So it can range from what is the meaning you're making out of it, or what comes up for you, or whatever it is. So those questions, I'm sure we already know, but we should be in a steady state. We can feel that, but we don't want to be with that the next moment.
Hmm. Thanks, Jesse. Anupati, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I would probably, so if I notice some feelings are coming up, I would give the feedback on what I'm seeing in the physiology, then ask what are they becoming aware of, because the feeling is attached to the thinking and the thinking is attached to a memory or something else. So I'll use that to probe down and then ask them to talk about it. So they don't need to acknowledge it. And the feeling is not about me as a coach, but more about them. So you're only reflecting. But what they're trying to do is not really go into it. But if it's showing up, then it is something that they need to go in. So I'll invite them, see how it goes. Usually it will tag to something else, which will come out as the core issue. If not, we drift forward. But the coachee takes a lead, and I don't get attached to it. I only throw back what I see or I sense. And if they say, no, no, it's not. So I'll give an example. There's a very, very dear friend of mine, a peer coach. We were doing peer coaching practice session. And I said in the session that, she made a face when she was talking. And I said, I saw you grimace. What's coming up? Is it making you uncomfortable when you're talking about? There was a strategy she was saying. She's like, no, no, not at all. 3 minutes later, she says, oh, you know what? I actually had a thought and da da da. So it came up, although initially she said no. So when she said no, I said, okay, maybe, my impression, my perception. But 3 minutes later, she said, no, no, now it makes sense. So what you're doing is you're bringing the spotlight, the awareness, and then it's their journey. And you're just supporting. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so a thinker will not work on the emotions, because he doesn't know how to process it. He will only, especially if he has not worked on himself in terms of working on the emotion.
Yeah.
Definitely. I thought it was the other way around. You said he acknowledged it and you got stuck. Because there are times when I've got clients crying. The early days, I didn't know what to do when my clients start to cry.
Yeah. I remember when we were in we were observing a peer coaching session in a group, right? And someone reached out to me and he was like, Dipali, do you feel the heaviness that is going on in in the session that's happening right now? So even as observers, we may not be in the moment as a coach or coachee, but we are also able to absorb whatever is happening, right? And it does affect even the observer. Yeah. I was just adding to what Mamoon had talked about, the the coachees crying, clients crying. All right, great. We have about 3 more minutes before we end. Do we have anything that we would like to add? Anything you want to integrate into your coaching, when you coach your clients, anything that stood out for you that you want to kind of start using, or you've started using from at least what we've read so far?
I think for me, the concept of power is the most something that I encounter a lot with because I focus on middle management and I see that a lot. So that's the that
Hmm.
having that framework allows an easier conversation.
Got it. Thank you. Deepti?
There's one thing that, I mean, it's just coming up as a thought is that, you know, the ones who are near awakening or have awakened, right, as they say, that is stage 4-ish, right? They normally start speaking about the universe. That the book says that, right? So you can see it in conversations, and you know, it's like, then you, I mean, when we are speaking and we realize, okay, the other person is speaking like us, you know, okay, this person is someone that you can go a little more than, you know, material world. You can go a little more, and that's, I mean, that's what stood out for me right now.
Got it. And anything that you'll want to use in your sessions? Nothing at the moment. Okay. All right. Great. Sandeep, anything you want to add?
Nothing. I think it is motivating me to read more faster. Yeah.
Jesse, what about you?
Uh, mm, yeah. So I've not read the book.
Read the
so
book, yeah.
Next time I'll be coming prepared.
All right, great. So, Anubhuti, sorry, I didn't ask you.
Haven't read the book, but I think I better start getting it to it.
So what do we want to do for next week, next month before we close? Shall we do the next next 3 chapters? How do we want to play it? Next 3?
So how is it logically organized?
We actually thought we were going to read the whole book. Then a lot of people reached out to me saying that it's very heavy. We cannot read the whole book in one go. We took a poll on the group, and everyone, kind of said that let's break it down chapter wise. So the first session, we had the first 3 chapters. Now we have 4, 5, 6. And the next session, shall we do the next 3? Are we okay
Yeah.
with that?
How many chapters are there?
Good question.
19.
So ऐसे तो we'll be doing it for what, 2-3 months.
Yeah, I know.
But अभी भी नहीं हो रहा.
अभी भी नहीं हो रहा. Wait, let me stop recording now. 1 second. अभी नहीं हो रहा. Okay, all right.